Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I'm Adam Sexton. It's hard to believe, but 2 full decades have passed now since the September 11th attacks. This has been a weekend of reflection, an unearthing of some old feelings, and a re-examination of the national wound we suffered on that day. Here to share with us his recollections is former 3-term U.S. Senator Judd Gregg. Senator, thanks for taking time to connect with us this morning.
Adam, thank you for having me on.
So the morning of September 11th, 2001, you're in your Washington office early. You're a U.S. Senator. You're watching this unfold. When the second plane hits, you realize it's a terrorist attack. And you have to kind of go into dad mode because you actually have a daughter in New York City.
Yeah, it was an immensely traumatic period for all Americans. Nothing like it had happened before, with the exception possibly of the assassination of John Kennedy. And everybody remembers where they were and what they were doing. At that time, I was in the office getting ready for a hearing, and saw the first plane go in, and I figured, gee, what a terrible accident. And then when I saw the second plane go in, it was obviously a terrorist attack. I was the ranking member, the senior Republican on the Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee. Ted Kennedy was the chairman of the committee. Both our offices were on the same floor of the Russell Building. I was around the corner from him. And we had scheduled a hearing with Mrs. Bush, Laura Bush, to come up and talk about education. And when the second plane went into the building, it was pretty darn traumatic. And I called Ted and I said, you know, Ted, we can't have the hearing, obviously. And Ted said, well, I think Mrs. Bush is in the building. Why don't you come down to my office and we'll see what we do? And so I went down to his office, and Mrs. Bush was there, Laura, and we went into his office, just the three of us, Laura, myself, and Ted Kennedy. And his office is filled with pictures of his family and family events. And he started talking about Jack Kennedy and the assassination of his brother and his other brother and Bobby. And he was going from picture to picture, as we'd spent a lot of time together during the campaigns. And, you know, it was really a strange moment, quite honestly. And then we talked a little bit and we said, well, we better do a statement. So we went across the hall to the hearing room, which was the Russell hearing room, which is the famous room where the Watergate hearings were held. And there was obviously a very large contingent of press there. And Ted really gave an amazingly moving statement. And then Mrs. Bush did the same, and I said something. But their statements were both really appropriate and elegant to the moment, which was horrible. And so we walked out of the room, out of the hearing room. We didn't take any questions. And Ted went back into his office, and Mrs. Bush and I were walking down the hallway, and the Secret Service came running up. They were around her all the way, but some other ones came running up, and they said, we can't take you back to the White House, Mrs. Bush. And we looked at each other, and I said, well, Laura, why don't you come and sit in my office until they figure out what they're going to do? So we went around the corner of my office, which wasn't too big an office. It's a nice office. And the two of us were in the room, in the office. And she was trying to reach her daughters and the president. And I was trying to reach my oldest daughter, Molly, who was in New York City. And she had an apartment down in Soho, not too far from the World Trade Centers. And we just watched the buildings collapse and a massive amount of smoke that covered the whole city of New York, which was so startling and difficult to assimilate. And we talked, obviously. And we were together there for about 45 minutes, maybe longer, just the two of us. And she was trying to reach her kids and the president. I finally reached Molly. And then the Secret Service came in and said they had evacuated the building. And actually, myself and Mrs. Bush and my chief and my administrative assistant, Vasiliki Alexopoulos from Nashua, who ran my Washington office, were the only ones left in the building, the only ones left in the Russell office building. I told Vas, go home, get out of here. And so she left. And so it was really myself, Mrs. Bush, and the Secret Service. And the Secret Service finally decided what they were going to do. They came in, they said, we're going to take you, Mrs. Bush, now to a location. They didn't tell me what it was, obviously. And she headed out. And then I called Kathy, and I said, Kathy, I'm going to come back to the house. I don't know how long it'll take me because obviously I assumed the traffic was going to be all stopped and everything. And so I went down to the garage, got in my car, and drove home, and the pathway to our house was over the 14th Street Bridge. So as I was going over the 14th Street Bridge, I, of course, could see the Pentagon burning. And there was no traffic at all. And I got back, and Kathy and I worked to make sure that Molly was taken care of. She had to walk from her office back down to her apartment, which was many, many, many blocks. And we just wanted to stay in constant contact with her, made sure she didn't take the subway and things like that. It was a very traumatic time, to say the least, and obviously for everyone it was a traumatic time, and clearly if you were in New York it was even more traumatic.
Yeah, it's stunning there that you just so happened to be with the First Lady. Was there any sense from the Secret Service of the potential danger? Obviously it was a very fluid situation, but we know that one of those flights was likely headed for either the White House or the Capitol building.
Yes, they absolutely understood that the White House might be attacked, and that's why they weren't going to take her back there. The plane that went down in Pennsylvania, I think the conclusion was that it was headed towards the Capitol, but it could easily have headed towards the White House.
Yeah, just circling back for a moment there, just to be in that room, you know, everybody talks about 9/11 as one of those indelible national tragedy moments. And, you know, circling back to almost the Kennedy assassination, that had to be so surreal to be with Senator Kennedy as he's reflecting on the loss of his brother in these dual kind of national tragedies surrounding you at that moment.
Adam, surreal is the right word. It really was. I mean, it was such an extraordinarily unusual experience. And Senator Kennedy is a national figure. He's a good friend, actually, even though we were at different parties and we disagreed on just about everything, but we were good friends. And he was obviously being traumatized. He was obviously having a flashback to this situation with his brothers. And in that room, when the three of us were there, he obviously gathered himself together and made a really elegant and appropriate statement. But it was a difficult time for him because I think a lot of things came forward in his mind that it really were difficult.
In the hours and days that followed, obviously, there was a moment of tremendous national unity. What was it like working in Washington in that situation where suddenly partisanship was by the wayside?
Well, that's one of the amazing strengths of our nation is that we come together so effectively when we have national events that are traumatizing. Whether they're physical like this, the attack on Pearl Harbor, I'm sure was the same, or whether they're financial, like the financial meltdown of 2008. And so people did pull together. Everybody wanted to know what we should do next to make sure that we were not attacked again. Of course, all country came to a halt, and all airplanes were not flying anywhere. And the movement around the country stopped and the economy was basically halted. And the Congress was trying to figure out how to approach this. Kathy and I went down for a private dinner with the president and Mrs. Bush the next day or the day after. And we talked about things that needed to be done and what he hoped to do. And he was very much on top of what he was going to do. And I thought his actions in the post 9/11 period were extraordinary, showed extraordinary leadership. Obviously, his statement at the site was, you know, just an incredible statement that rings true through the ages. But going out and throwing the first baseball out at Yankee Stadium, act of bravery. I mean, we didn't know who was in that stadium. And then I think, you know, there's been a lot of second guessing of what was done. But the bottom line is, for 20 years, we have not been attacked again. And the reason we haven't been attacked again, in my opinion, is that we have acted extraordinarily aggressively as a nation through our military and our intelligence capabilities to try to find the people who might want to attack us and take them out. And that's the only way you can deal with these people. You can't, this is not a touchy-feely event. This is people who are who see us as their fundamental enemy, and they are evil. And they're still out there, unfortunately. They don't go away. This is a fanaticism that has gone through generations and centuries, and it's not going away. And it still targets the West as its enemy. And we are the leader of the West, and so we're still the enemy. So we still have to be incredibly vigilant and aggressive, in my opinion. And I think President Bush was. President Obama certainly was, following on And that's why we haven't been attacked again.
Senator, I'm curious of your thoughts of the legacy there. Obviously, the threat continues. The global war on terror essentially never ends. But with Iraq and Afghanistan, what's the legacy of what happened in those two countries for the United States?
Well, we stopped the terrorists from attacking us. That's the primary legacy. The second legacy was the mistake, which was that we tried to nation build in areas where democracy and our concept of Western values are not really the vibrant source of culture. The basic fundamentalist Islam is the culture of those countries, and basically that means there is no separation of state and religion. In fact, religion is the state and dominates the state. And we don't appreciate the subtlety of that and the importance of that as a Western culture that tries to embrace everyone. Fundamental Islam doesn't try to embrace anybody. It, in fact, treats anyone who doesn't agree with it as an enemy. So I think nation building was bound to fail in both of those nations. That was our mistake, but it was not a mistake to go in, find the people who were threatening us, and make sure that they couldn't organize and threaten us again.
Well, Senator Gregg, thank you so much for sharing your perspective on that fateful day with us on Close Up. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam.